So, I think we have done quite a bit on control structures as far as PHP is concerned. We had looked at selection, and I would say selection is basically where you execute your code based on some conditions, whether they are true or false. And we gave implementations. There was if then, else, there was if then, else if. Then we looked at nested ifs, and then we looked at the switch statement. Then I think from there, we went ahead and looked at the other example of selection, which is switch. And we explained what switch does. We basically say that when you have a variable and you want to check it for different values, then in that particular case, you'd want to be able to use a switch statement. And I think we used temperature for our example. Then we looked at the second control structure, which was iteration or repetition. And we said in this particular case, you want to execute a given code block a given number of times or until a certain condition is met. So we looked at its implementation, the for loop, the do while loop, and of course the while loop. Then we also looked at the for each loop and also how we can be able to loop through array elements. Then I think that's where we stopped at. So today we're supposed to look at what we call flow control. So in flow control, we simply want to determine how this code is going to execute. It may not necessarily repeat a given number of times, but we want to control how the program is going to move back and forth. Remember, for selection, it executes based on some condition. For iteration, it executes a number of times or until a condition is met. But now, when it comes to flow control, we want to be able to move either up or down or things like that. So we basically want to control how the flow of the program, the direction that the program is going to take in terms of execution. So flow control is all about the direction of flow of the program, right? So,
Okay.
here is direction of the flow for the program. Now we have seen this before. When we are looking at the switch, we looked at one of them called break. So the implementations, the first one will be, I don't know how I was numbering them. I was numbering them ABC. Yeah? So for flow control, let's look at break. So break, basically what it will do is it will allow you to exit.
And your voice is breaking, eh?
Oh, my voice is breaking. I don't know if
Yeah.
it is if it is the keyboard. Let me try to bring it closer. I think maybe probably it's the keyboard. How about that?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
So break, I said, allows you to exit a current loop, a current iteration, or a switch statement. So it is used to either exit a current iteration or a switch statement. Let me explain how. Let's say you want to generate the first odd numbers, the first 10 odd numbers, then maybe when you reach 30, you stop, right?
Okay.
So, or maybe you want to generate the odd numbers from 1 to 30, but you want to count the first 10 only. Are you together?
Okay.
So, this case here is generate, generate uh, odd numbers from 1 to 30, then the first 10, isn't it? That makes sense. So it means I'll have 1, 3, 5, 7, and I continue like that. Once I count 10 of them, I stop. Is it clear?
Sure.
Okay, so how do we achieve that?
You use a counter.
Yeah, definitely we'll use a counter. So basically what you're going to say is, first of all, of course, we have to use an iteration, which is a for loop, isn't it? So I'll say for um, a variable I starting at 1 to I is less than 30, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a variable. This is not JavaScript, this is PHP. So occasionally I forget. Then I'll say increment I by 1. So then here I can simply declare odd numbers and give it a blank value, isn't it?
Mhm.
So then here what I will say, I'll simply say if I mod 2 is equals to 0, what is that? That's an even number, so I'll say is not equal to,
Not equal to.
isn't it?
Yeah.
If I, this is not 1, this is I. If I modulus 2 is not equal to 0, then I'll simply say odd numbers equals to add I, then put a comma, isn't it? There's a dot here, like that, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay, so semicolon here. So that's so far so good, isn't it?
Mhm.
But then again, we want to get the first 10 only, isn't it?
Yeah, the first 10.
Yeah, so if we take the first 10, so it means I'll add a counter here, counter, and I'll give it 1 by default, isn't it? So it
Yeah.
starts at 1. So here I'll simply say counter increment, isn't it?
Mhm.
We did all these things the other time. So we use iteration, we use selection, and we also use increment, isn't it? We also
Yeah.
use string concatenation. So all the things we did last time are basically covered in this particular example. Sindio?
Yes.
Now, what do we do from here? So if I wanted to exit the loop, I'll simply say if counter is greater than or equal to 10, then what do I do? I'll simply
Exit.
say break, not exit.
How many VB, yeah?
Yes.
Oh,
You will have exited sub. Yeah, or you'd have exit. Yeah, you'd have just said exit, not exit sub, but exit. So I believe that should be able to work. Then, of course, when I'm done here, I'll simply go ahead. So basically, what it will do, it will just go when it realizes the word break, it will exit the loop, which means it will exit this for loop. So it will go and execute what is after the loop. Okay. So we can simply say here echo um, uh, string here. The numbers are. Then I'll simply put my odd numbers, isn't it?
yeah.
That should allow me to generate odd numbers between 1 and 30, the first 10 only. So it means I should have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13,
7
15,
and 9.
17, and 19. Those are the first 10, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's see if that would be the case. Okay. So open my browser.
Your voice is still breaking.
I think probably it's maybe the internet because my computer is right next to my nose, and I think I should invest in a microphone moving forward. So localhost, this is PHP intro, and we're dealing with control structures. And you can see I have 1, 3, 5, at least 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I said less than or equal to, and I think I probably exited earlier. So let me just go back to that. I missed one, but I think the principle is just fine. Less than or equal to is should be greater than. Let me say because you're starting at because you're starting at 0. Let's start at 0 so that we end at 10, so that we count exactly 10. So if I do that, you can see it generates 1, 3, 5 all the way to 19. Those are the first 10 odd numbers between 1 and 30. Okay. Oh, sorry. You're seeing my screen, right? It's frozen. Ama, it's actually okay. Oh, I lost my network. Sorry. Sorry, I lost my network. Sorry, I lost my network. Let it just reconnect. I think I touched my cable somewhat. So just give me a minute or so to be able to resume. Right. So okay. Sorry about that small mishap. So as I was saying, what I did just before the cutoff was I changed the counter. Instead of starting from one, I started from zero so that I get the exact 10 because I'm checking if they're greater than or equal to 10. So if I come back to my code and I run it, you should be able to see that the numbers generated are 1 all the way to 135 all the way to 19. So that way, I'm able to generate the first odd numbers between 1 and 30, but I want to only generate the first 10. Are you together?
Yes.
Interesting, right? So what it means is that it will execute this particular loop, this for loop, but it will check if this condition has been met. If this condition has been met, then this break statement will exit the loop. So it basically will mean instead of continuing with this particular loop, it will come and execute the code after the loop. So executes from here. Okay. So when you say break, it will exit the current loop, which is this one. Then it will start executing the code right after the loop, which is what is below here. So,
Kabisa.
so that's the first one. Now, the second one is what we call continue. Now, what do you think continue will do?
It will transfer control back to the loop.
It will transfer the control back to the loop. No, it will
Mhm,
exit only the current iteration. This will break the loop, the iteration.
mhm.
This will break only the current iteration. So only breaks only the current iteration. Iteration. So let's say, for example, I want to generate the first odd numbers between 1 and 30, and I don't want those numbers that are divided by 3. Okay? So in short, I don't want 3, I don't want 9, I don't want 15, I don't want 21. Neither do I want 27, right? So I want those odd numbers between 1 and 30, but I don't want those numbers that are divisible by 3. Are we together?
Yes.
So I'll say generate odd numbers between 1 and 30 and exclude those divisible by 3. Okay?
Mhm.
So I'll mask these ones, this code up here. Then I'm hoping, by the way, that my recording is still on. Yeah, it's still on. Thank you. So it's always good to confirm. Otherwise, we might end up in the issues we had last time. God forbid. So here, I'll just declare odd numbers is blank. Then ideally, I'll use a for loop. So I'll say for the variable I, or you can even do a do while. So let's not use for. Let's maybe use do while. So I'll use while uh, I is less than or equal to 30. Start I here at 1. then do the following, isn't it? Then of course I'll increment I by 1 down here, I plus plus. Then here I'll simply now come and check if I modulus of 2, I'm missing an I modulus of 2 is equals to 0, is not equal to 0, isn't it?
Yeah.
That returns true. So the next thing I do again is I will check if um, I divided by 3 is equals to 0. Then here I'll simply say continue, which means it will only exit the current loop. Okay? So down here I'll simply say, so the current loop here is this, when I is 2, then it will now go to the next one. So it will only exit the current one, but will not, it will just continue the loop, escaping the current value. That's the whole point, right?
Okay.
Exit the loop only based on the current value you're working on. You see the previous one, it was exiting the entire loop. It didn't matter what follows after that. So long as the condition will be met, move away from the loop and execute the code that follows the loop. In this other scenario, it will exit the current loop only. Okay? So
Okay.
that continues exit the current loop. So I can go here and I'll say what numbers plus equal. Then I'll put I'll put a comma. Then I'll simply put here a semicolon to terminate that statement. Then down here, I can come now and say echo the numbers are, then I'll say odd numbers like that. Then of course I'll put a semicolon here. So that what ideally this code should do is it should generate the numbers between 1 and 30, check the ones that are odd numbers. If they are odd numbers, it checks if it is divisible by 3. If it is divisible by 3, it will exit that current loop, then it will continue. Okay? So that's the whole idea here. So let's see if that works out. 127. Time is 127. All right, so semicolons are a bit of my issues. I've accepted that. 132. 132, 132. This should be a dot, not a. So right again. Now that looks like it's an endless loop. Huh? I don't know why, but that actually looks like it's an endless loop. It should have finished. So we simply say if I is less than or equal to 30, and I'm incrementing I. Mhm. Okay, let me do this. Let me edit here and start at 0. Did I miss my do while loop? Let me try that again. Wow, that becomes a problem because it's going to be an endless loop. So stop it. Try again. Control F5. So you can see it actually does that. So I had actually I had actually written an endless loop. Remember, where you place the variable is very important because if I put the variable down here and I exit the loop, I will never increment. Okay? So if I put the I down here, the way I'd put it, it means that if I exit this loop, I would never increment because it just go to the next value and it will continue doing that, and that becomes an indefinite or an endless loop. So where you place your variables or your increments are also very, very important. That's why I have moved it at the top here so that now, even after I'm exiting that particular loop, the increment is still possible to have. Okay?
Yeah.
So again, as you can be able to see, it has done just that. So I have 1, 5, 7, 11. So you can see out of all this number, there's no number that is divisible by 3, and all of them are actually odd numbers. It's because I'm incrementing I here, so that will probably be the reason why. So I should say less than 30. Then that should be able to fix it. Mm, has that fixed it? Yes, that has fixed it. Yeah, so I was just being reminded that it's supposed to be up to 30. Yeah, but again, I usually don't have an issue with those small mistakes. But as you can see, these flow controls are actually very, very powerful. Okay, so that's the second one. There's a third one called go to. Right, so C is go to. So go to basically jumps to a given label. Okay, so um, let's say I want to generate odd numbers, or rather even numbers between 1 and 30. And once I reach 10, stop the loop, right? Just using that simple example based on what we have used currently. So generate even numbers from 1 to.
Una break bad, umerudia ku breaks legend.
Oh, so luckily I've not touched my cable. So I think probably it's just maybe the connectivity. But hopefully uh, in the recording, I think the breakups are not going to be there. Okay, hopefully, maybe on the live one we have an issue, but moving forward, when I am done with the recording, I'm hoping that those breaks are not going to be there since everything is done locally. So as I was saying, we want to use goto, and we have said goto jumps you to a particular level, a particular defined level. So it allows you to go and start executing code at a particular defined level. So, for example, I want to be able to generate the first odd numbers between 1 and 100, and I want to stop as soon as I hit 10. Okay? I want to stop as soon as I hit 10. Stop, right? So give me the odd numbers, give me the even numbers between 1 and 100. The moment you hit 10, stop. So it means 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and a stop on that, right? Now I know you can still use break for that, but I want to show us how to use go to, because the whole idea here is how to implement them inside your flow control. Okay, so again, I'll just mask these pieces of code over here, and I'll come down here, and I'll simply say even numbers is equals to blank. Well, let me just not even put like that. Let me just say I want to use a do while, so I'll say my counter starts at 0. Then I'll simply say do. Then I repeat my conditions over here. Do this. Then I'll put my while condition down here, isn't it?
Mhm.
So my while condition will be down there. So that's how we write the syntax, right? So do the following. So first of all, I'll increment counter by 1. Okay. Then as I'm incrementing counter, I'll simply say echo. Then I'll put the number, which is counter. But first of all, I want to check if the counter divided by 2 will give me a 0. And if that is the case, then I want to output the counter, right?
Mhm.
Then I want to maybe output the counter and add a comma next to it, so that now the next counter is looking a bit nicer. Then I increment counter by 1. But here, I'll simply say if, rather this should be behind a bit. Here I'll simply come and say if the counter is greater than or equal to 10, what do I do? I simply go to, then I simply specify stop. Okay?
Mhm.
Or maybe say end. Let me just use stop. Stop counter. Then, of course, here I'll simply say while counter is less than or equal to 100, right? So, of course, this counter will continue. So, and I'll simply put the label down here like that with a full column. Sorry. So you put this label here with a full column and simply call it, that's where the program stops, okay? So I can simply say echo, the code has stopped. Something like that. Okay, so I'll do that. I think I've taken care of everything else. So I have my do while there looking nice. So I don't think I have an issue over there. Actually, I think this one doesn't need a semicolon. So it is do, yeah, it should be like that. Okay. So stop counter, basically what this will do, it will start at 0. Then it will check if 0 divided by 2 is equals to 0. It will output it, or maybe I could start at 1. Start at 1, moving forward. Then I'll check if 1 divided by 2 is 0. It returns there is no remainder, in short. Then if there's no remainder, I'll check if the number that you're generating is more than 10. If it is more than 10, I simply stop the execution of the program. So that's how go to works. So go to label, and this is the label. Then I put a semicolon, and then I'm able to execute what follows after the label. So let's try that and see. Well, line 153, 153. Mhm. Or here, semicolon, just right before that. Sorry, I'm very notorious with that. It's expecting line number 155. Stop counter. So the code has stopped, but what I forgot to mention is I wanted to output the numbers first. Sorry about that. I was supposed to output the numbers. I was supposed to output the, well, yeah, it should have outputted the number. If counter is greater than, sorry, if counter is greater than 10, right? It will, oh, sorry, I'll generate, then I'll check, sorry. Placement of the variable is very important. So you can see I have 2, 4, 6, 8, and then it has stopped. Okay, that's what I expected it to do, to give me those odd numbers. Then once it reaches 10, it stops. I can go ahead and tell it, why don't you count for me up then 30? So count, if reach 30, stop, right? So I do that, and you can see it counts up to 30 and it stops. So those are the flow control structures that we have as far as PHP is concerned. We have break, we have continue, and then we have go to. Any question up to that point? I believe these ones are easy
Uko sawa?
because
Sijui Cyprian akoaje.
he's there. He'll speak for himself. Anyway, that's fine, right? So we were supposed to have completed this in the last class, but I felt that maybe it would have been a little bit too much. So I think I held it, and I think right now it is able to sink in very clearly. Is that so?
Yeah,
So excellent. So that's good. We have actually done what we call, those are the control structures as far as PHP programming language is concerned. So I want to switch gears and move into things called functions. Is that okay?
sure.
So I'll create a new file here, and I'll call it functions.php. So what is a function? A function is basically or essentially a code block which performs some certain operation. And why we use functions is first of all to avoid repetition. Okay, so they're basically or they are naturally code blocks which allow us to perform a particular operation. Sometimes they return a value, sometimes they don't return a value. It will depend on how you have written it. But at the end of the day, the aim of writing function is to be able to eliminate, to reduce repetition as far as your code is concerned. So let's take, for example, we want to be able to output a message to our user, say hello world, and we want to repeat it 100 times, right? So if you wanted to repeat the message hello 100 times, so we can just output on screen echo hello, echo hello, echo hello, and we do that 100 times, right? But in a nutshell, we could actually create a function that allows us to be able to do the same. So every time you want to say hello, we simply call the function and it is able to output the result. So maybe outputting hello is a little bit of an understatement because ideally we would perform certain functions like say compute taxes or maybe send emails or even check connectivity on our network and stuff like that. So these are operations that you're going to be doing repeatedly over and over again, or maybe even connecting to our database. So we are going to repeat this process over and over again, and we don't want to be able to repeat ourselves. So functions come to our rescue. So let's see the syntax of writing functions in PHP. So I'll begin with a very simple function. So whenever you want to use a function in PHP, you simply define it with the keyword function. Then you give it a function name. So I can simply say hello world as a function. Then you put parentheses. All functions you must have parentheses whether you have arguments or not. Arguments are the values that we pass throughout our function so that they can be able to be used within the function. So in our case, we don't have any arguments for this one. So I'll simply put open and close bracket. Then my code block is going to go inside here. So I can simply say here echo hello world. This should be double quotes. Then, of course, I terminate with a semicolon like that. So this is a function. Now, if I run this code, what do you think would happen? Make a guess based on our previous experience, or should I run it?
This one,
Mm.
to show function.
It's supposed to be very obvious. Well, let's try and see. So we come here and we say functions, and we press enter, and there's no there's nothing on our screen. So whenever you write a function, the function will not do anything until you invoke it. Okay, so
Yeah.
functions by default will not, they are basically more like a template. They're not going to do anything unless you invoke it. So if you want to invoke a function, simply call the function name, then put open and closing bracket. If it has arguments, you will pass the arguments over there. So we look at a function that has arguments in a short while. So this is the invocation. So this is the definition.
Mhm.
This is definition, and this is invocation. And they can be in any order.
Okay.
I don't have to define it, then invoke it. I can invoke it, then define it. It's a template, so it will look for it on the current document or on attached document as long as it is invoked. So if I did that and I output that, you should not be able to see it says hello world.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So without invocation, then it is not able to execute. When I invoke it by calling its name or when I call it, then it comes and execute the function in itself.
Okay.
So this is a very simple function, and this function does not have variables. What happens when you have functions with variables? When you have a function with variables, you can put the variable inside here, like maybe say my name. And remember, PHP is a loosely typed language, so you don't need to define the data type that you're using at the moment. So I'll simply say hello world, my name. Then if I wanted to put my name outside here, I'll simply say my name. Okay, so my name will be used inside the function itself. So when I am calling this function, I'll be asked to put my name, something like Richard Kilo. That's actually a string. So what this function should do, it will take it will say hello Richard Akelo. And this is where the repetition comes in. If I had another person called Michael Joseph, and I come and do say here Michael Joseph, it will simply execute the same thing with now the newer um, parameters, right? Which is Michael Joseph. So when I come and execute this and I run it, you're going to see hello Richard Akelo and hello Michael Joseph, right? Now, I don't know why I'm having an issue with this version of PHP. I don't know if it's a version of PHP on my computer, because ideally this should have been able to allow me to create new lines. I don't know why it's not creating new lines, but I think you get the point. So I have hello Richard Akelo and hello world Michael Joseph, and I can repeat the same process over and over for different names. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So now we know how to define a function. We know how to define a function with argument. And by the way, when you have more than one argument, you simply separate them with commas. Okay?
Oh. Mm.
So let's talk about default values. Sometimes you have functions and they have default values. So default values. Let's say, for example, I want a function that uh, multiplies a number, two numbers, and if I've not provided the second number, it multiplies the number that you've given us by two. Okay, so
Yeah.
I have a function that multiplies two numbers, and if I don't supply the second number, then it will assume that I'm multiplying it by two. Okay, so how
Okay.
do we write that function? So what you're going to do is you're going to come here and say function um, product, isn't it?
Mhm.
And the product takes two parameters, a
M and N.
A and B, yeah?
Mhm.
A and B. Okay?
Mhm.
Then with A and B, I'll simply tell it echo the sum of A, or rather A and B is, then I'll say A times B, isn't it?
Mhm.
That makes sense? So down here, I simply come and say product. I call the function product 4 and 5. That should give me 20, isn't it? So let's
Mhm.
see. 4 and 5 will give me, well, I would put it as a string because uh, it will not be able to perform the mathematical operation over there. I'll simply say answer here is equals that. Then I'll output answer here. Okay? So when I run that, it should now tell me line number 16. What did I miss? Semicolon, I guess, obviously. Okay. You'll forgive me for that. Eh? So you can see now, actually, it's not the sum but the product. So the product of 4 and 5 is 20. Okay. Now we said if we don't provide the second parameter, we want it to assume that it is 2, isn't it? So if you want to put a default parameter, you'll put an equal to sign, then you put the value that you want. Then down here, I can now come and say product, then something like 9. So if I don't put the second parameter, then it means that the value will be 18, isn't it? So I run that, and you can see now it is 18 because it takes 2 as now the default. Okay?
Yeah.
So that is how you write functions with default parameters. So whenever you have to have default parameters, simply define the variable and use an equal to sign and assign it a default value. Then at that particular instant, the last parameter is optional. Now, what if you want the first parameter to be optional? What do you do?
Optional as in?
You the first parameter will be optional, which means it can be provided. Well, maybe let me not complicate it. Maybe we can look at it later when looking at associative arrays. Eh? So let me not
Oh,
complicate it for now. I think I'll confuse you more. So let me leave it at that. Okay.
Okay.
So then there is the component also of functions that return values. As you can see, these functions that we have up here don't return any values. They basically just execute and that's it. Okay. So we have
Yeah.
functions that return value, functions that return values. So for the functions that return values, what you're going to do is this. Let's say, for example, I want to create a function that adds two numbers and then gives me the results. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll write the function like this. I'll say function some numbers. It expects A and it also expects B.
Mm.
But because I want it to give me the answer of A plus B, I'll simply say return A plus B. All right?
Uh-huh.
Return, not return, it is return. Return A plus B. So it will basically take the number A, add the number B, and then return that particular value. So down here, if I wanted to use that calculation, I can simply say my variable called answer is equals to, then I call sum of numbers, then I simply say 3 and 2. So if I echo sum, I should be able to see that it gives me 5, isn't it?
Okay.
The sum is, then I simply say answer. So that way, we can be able to see that at this, all the functions we had called before were not returning any values, but the function that I've just created right now will return a value, which is a plus b. Then that value, I can be able to use it to assign to a variable, then use that variable with those numbers. And in a nutshell, mostly or most of the time, I would be making my operations operate this way when I'm writing functions. I'll be sometimes expecting them to return values, sometimes expecting them not to return values. So we run that, and you can see the sum is 5 because I've said it is 3 and 2. If I say it is 3 and say maybe say 56, I should be able to get 59, right? So you can be able to see it gives me that. Yeah. Okay, so you can see the answer over there. So as I was mentioning, if at this particular point I can return a value, or I can just call the function, it executes, does whatever it needs to do, and it stops at that. Functions can also have arguments, or they might not have arguments, and at the same time, function can have default value for the argument or not. So, in a nutshell, you can define a function that returns a value or does not return a value. You can define a function that has arguments or does not have arguments, or you can define functions that have arguments and some of those arguments are optional, others are necessary, okay, or mandatory. So it will depend on really the operation that you want to be able to achieve. That's quite something, isn't it? Right?
That's good.
Can I go into a new topic, or now I can give you some tasks to be able to achieve? I know I have control structures, which is flow control, that is break, continue, and go to. Then now I have functions, and I'm saying functions can be in either of the 6 ways. They can return a value, they might not return a value. They can have parameters, they may not have parameters. The parameters can be optional, or the parameters may be necessary. So if you're looking at them from that particular perspective, then you realize that they actually give us quite some a bit of flexibility in terms of how we can be able to customize them to be able to achieve certain results, isn't it? Now, I want us to take a small assignment and write a function that generates odd numbers between two numbers and then returns for me the sum of that odd numbers.
You're breaking.
Sorry, I'm saying I want us to perform a simple task here. Say, for example, I want us to write a function that will take two numbers, x and y. It will give me the odd numbers between x and y and then sum the results.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Can you be able to achieve that?
Sure.
Are you sure? I give you 5 minutes to try, then we can solve it together.
Yeah, maybe you can try.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can try for 5 minutes. Then I'll probably give my solution. Then we can have a close at that. We probably uh, look at arrays on Wednesday. I don't want to start arrays because they are actually a very huge topic. So I wanted us to discuss array once and for all. Discuss arrays and everything we need to know about arrays as far as PHP is concerned, because that is the one data type that we're going to use like nonsense. Okay.
Okay.
So 5 minutes, this is 1910. 1915, we simply come back and look at your solution. Then maybe I can be able to give my solution so we can be able to see exactly how that works out. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. So the timer starts now.
Okay, come on, keep tight, huh? In the steps.
Hmm?
They keep tight, come on, come on. I don't know, not just-
Not 100%. Sometimes they lay, but the best is at 8 sharp, right? So if you leave at 7:45, should be able to make it there.
Then the other one by somewhere, around there.
Oh, you don't have a small light, okay. So you want to leave now. So how about this meeting of ours? This meeting of ours, you can have it with online. When you arrive tomorrow.
You can have them.
Okay. Okay. So because you want to have a bite, I think that's understandable.
Before that, okay, that's what you want.
Okay.
Yeah, that's rolled out.
Okay. Great. So the meantime, let me kind of do this together online. Then I can also show you the
Sawa, sawa. Yeah, bwana. So they were there, Gray. What the Gray? Oh, his name never forgotten. Mm. Eh, basically, kani ne ke da ko ji to ita ne ne ko ji ga ne to da ji. Mm. Quindi noi la oggi per andare a lavoro, siccome adesso abbiamo bisogno di un po' di lavoro, adesso cosa, ora ci spiego, la vedere anche due come si fa. Ne carica con loro. ya girka. Mm, mm. Na ruwa ta na ruwa ruwa ta
Okay, I think time's up.
ruwa.
Do you have a solution?
Ah, ina kaje su. Zai yi ba ka da su.
Richard,
Yes.
you are saying the time is up.
Yes, it's 5 minutes.
Please God.
Why, why are you thinking so hard about that solution? It's a simple solution.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. You know,
Yes.
I'm not thinking very hard. Eh?
Yes.
I'm just trying to look for the that is the logic, especially when you are learning a new language.
Yes.
It is
The
something very
syntax
new.
is very key. Eh?
Syntax is very key.
I know the syntax may be a challenge. So the solution will be this. So I'll simply write a function here, function.
So nimeandika,
Mhm.
I've declared two variables. I have
Maybe,
two
maybe,
variables.
maybe we can start by you sharing your screen so that.
No, I can. I have discovered in the laptop I don't have the PC code.
Okay.
It is in the other computer that I have next to me, ile ya ofisi. Maybe
Okay.
nitainstall. Nimeona imekuliwa na Windows 11 haifanyi.
Okay.
Eh,
All right.
but I decided I started by having n and m.
Mm-hmm.
Where I said n is equals to 10,
Mm-hmm.
then m is equals to 30. Then I have the function
Mm-hmm.
or add odd numbers or add odd between two nums.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I pass the two ranges. Eh?
Okay.
Then now here I wanted to use the if
Mm-hmm.
uh, to to start actually from n to check n
Mm-hmm.
from n, that is n.
Mm-hmm.
Then I add it to sum.
Okay.
Then I look whether that number. No, the first thing is that I have to find that n is actually odd.
Okay.
If it is not odd, I just jump.
Okay.
I jump out. So I repeat again. I increment that n, the lower value,
Mm-hmm.
by one.
Okay.
Check if it is odd, then I add.
Okay.
Uh,
Now, yeah, that will work. So what you could do is you can say, yeah, function. I hope I'm still sharing my screen.
yeah, you are
So
sharing.
simply say function sum odd nums between. Again, when you're writing a function name, we need to give them uh, meaningful names, right?
Okay.
Provide x and y as my range, yes, isn't it? Start at x and end at y, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the first step. Then what I'll do here, I'll define a variable here called sum, and I'll make it 0, for example, right? Sum is 0 by default. So then I'll simply choose any iteration that I feel would work for me. I can use a while loop, I can use a do while loop, I can use a for loop, right? So let me use a while loop. So I'll simply say while um, uh, I'll declare a variable here and say my counter should start at x, and while my counter is less than or equal to y, then do the following, isn't it? Then of course I'll increment my counter by 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then here I just need to check if the counter, so if the counter divided by 2, we said order,
Yeah.
is not equal to 0, then what do we do? We simply say sum plus equal to counter. Or for those who like writing it easily, it's like saying sum is equals to sum plus
Some equals
counter.
counter.
So that's just a short form of writing it like that. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and that should allow us to be able to perform that. So This will only be able to be this operation here will only be able to be performed if the counter modulus 2 is is 0. But I could have still put the counter down here, and then I simply continue here, which means exit the current loop, and it will still be able to work out. Okay, depends
Okay.
on how you are looking at the logic. I said all of us will be able to apply different logics to be able to get the same solution, but those are the two optional logics that we'll be able to apply. So once I'm done here, I'll simply say return what the sum.
So, yeah.
Then down here, for me to execute the term, let me generate the first odd numbers between 1 and 10. I can simply say echo, maybe I can say odd numbers, a variable odd numbers is equals to, then I'll simply say sum of odd numbers between 1 and 10. Okay? Then
Mhm.
I can say here uh, echo and the sum of numbers between 1 and 10 is, then of course I'll put my odd numbers, right?
Mhm.
So then that way, um, I can mask this one so that they don't execute. The function is just a template, so if I put it there without invoking it, nothing happens. So I'm interested in this last one. So let's see if that works out. So come here, run it. Well, number 37, most likely a semicolon. Here it's a semicolon. Don't worry, I have accepted my challenge in this programming language. Another one is on line number 44. Mhm. So the sum of numbers between 1 and 10 is 25. Is it true? So we have 1 plus 3 is 6, plus
Mhm.
5. 1 plus 3 is 1 plus 3 is 4.
4,
4 plus 5 is 9.
9,
9 plus 7 is 16, plus 9
16.
is 25. And you can see it has actually given us exactly that. So as you can see, when it comes to uh, functions, they can really help us do a lot of things because I can simply calculate, give me numbers between 10 and 100,000. So I can simply sum here and I simply say between maybe say 10 and maybe say 15,000. I know that's going to be quite some iteration, and I'll output this here. So between 10 and 15,000, and I'll give that. So I'll just mask this and I'll execute here. It will blink a bit. Actually, it does not blink a bit, and it has been able to calculate it very, very fast. So PHP nowadays has become fast, not like before. So the numbers between 1 and 15,000, the odd numbers, the sum of odd numbers between 10 and 15,000, the total of them will be 562,475. And I believe that will be accurate. All right. Kuna swali? Is there a question?
Naona miujiza. Nitaijaribu saa hii.
No, it's not very difficult.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm supposed to be back on the
okay.
window, and this is the code. So it's not difficult. I've just declared a function here that does exactly that, and it is able to sum it for me. When you look at arrays, I'm going to show you how to use arrays to even make it much, much more simpler and more elegant.
Okay.
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 Good. So I think that is quite something you can be able to take home. So just try to understand the things that I mentioned today. That is the flow control, and of course how we use functions in PHP, because we will be using a lot of control structures, flow control, and functions when we are doing our object-oriented programming.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
So if there's no question, let me look for an assignment that I can be able to give you for purposes of your practice.
It's out.
So I think you'll enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll meet again on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
You're most welcome. See you then.
Okay, asante sana.